Chapter 1. The Nanobubble Revolution, an Introduction. A new paradigm in medical science. Over the past several decades, advances in medical science have largely focused on the development of molecular drugs and invasive therapies. Yet these approaches often fail to address what the author regards as the root causes of various degenerative and metabolic diseases, including cancer, stroke, and diabetes. One of the principal challenges in conventional medical therapy is its inability to target the causes of disease directly at the cellular level, particularly in relation to oxygen distribution, the regulation of inflammation, and the restoration of mitochondrial homeostasis. This is where nanobubbles emerge as a new biomedical breakthrough, a technology presented not only as improving the body's gas transport system, but also as capable of addressing hypoxia, optimizing cellular metabolism, and even regenerating damaged tissue. This technology does not stand alone. It has been developed within a framework of community-based research services, an innovative model that allows research to be applied directly to patients on a broad scale without waiting for the lengthy regulatory processes associated with conventional clinical trials. What is a nanobubble? In simple terms, a nanobubble is a nano-sized gas bubble possessing several distinctive characteristics. An ultra-small size of less than 200 nanometers, allowing penetration into bodily tissues, including capillary vessels. High stability, allowing gas to remain suspended in a liquid for much longer than an ordinary bubble. A specific surface charge capable of interacting with cells and tissues and influencing physiological mechanisms. Nanobubbles may contain various gases, including oxygen, O2, intended to address hypoxia and increase ATP production. Hydrogen, H2, described as a powerful antioxidant that suppresses inflammation and oxidative stress. Carbon monoxide, CO, described as having immunomodulatory effects and inducing controlled apoptosis in cancer. Hydrogen sulfide, H2S, which regulates endothelial function and provides neuroprotection. This technology creates the possibility of delivering therapeutic gases into the body with an efficiency said to be substantially greater than that achieved through inhalation or direct injection. From theory to clinical application. The concept of nanobubbles was initially known primarily in the fields of water treatment and environmental technology. More recent research, however, has suggested that the technology may hold substantial potential in medicine. Within the reverse aging and homeostasis, RAHO, club community, nanobubbles have reportedly been applied to more than 15,000 research participants, with striking reported results across a range of medical conditions, including stroke, extending the golden window and enabling the regeneration of brain tissue previously considered irreversible. Cancer, restoring oxygen to capillaries and suppressing the Warburg effect, with some patients' cancers reportedly becoming inactive after dozens of therapy sessions. Hypertension and heart disease, breaking down atherosclerotic plaque through a cavitation effect and improving blood vessel elasticity. Diabetes, reducing insulin resistance and lowering HbA1c within a short period. In addition, the community-based research service model allows long-term monitoring of the effects of this therapy and generates data that, according to the author, are difficult to obtain through traditional clinical trials limited in both duration and number of participants. Community-based research services, a solution for Indonesian scientists. One of the greatest challenges in Indonesian medical research is the difficulty of implementing research findings in the real world. Many scientists succeed in discovering innovative solutions but are obstructed by regulations that do not allow them to test and apply their discoveries directly to patients. Structural obstacles in Indonesian medical research. Several principal factors make medical innovation difficult to implement in Indonesia. GMP requirements in clinical trials. Before a therapy or medical product can be tested in a clinical trial, it must be manufactured in a facility that complies with Good Manufacturing Practice, GMP, known in Indonesia as CPOB. This becomes a major obstacle for a new discovery. How can a scientist be expected to build an industrial-scale factory merely to test a concept that may not work? If the trial fails, the major investment in the factory that has already been constructed is wasted. The impact of trillions of rupiah invested in education is not visible in medical innovation. The Indonesian government has sent thousands of scientists overseas to study at renowned institutions, investing trillions of rupiah. Yet after they return to Indonesia, concrete outcomes from their medical research remain very limited. One major reason is the absence of a pathway for implementing medical innovation. The highest achievement of an academic therefore often ends with publication in a Q1 scientific journal rather than real-world implementation capable of saving patients' lives. The pinnacle of a scientist's achievement should not be publication, but the practical benefit that the discovery can bring to humanity. Limited funding and limited access to research participants. In conventional medical research, the cost of recruiting research participants is extremely high and often reaches billions of rupiah. At RAHO Club, by contrast, all scientists are also research participants. The scientists themselves undergo the nanobubble therapy they investigate. In addition, club administrators and all RAHO Club members are willing to become research participants, creating a unique model in which research can continue without dependence on major external institutional funding. RAHO Club, a new model for community-based research. One of RAHO Club's principal advantages is its independent and sustainable funding model, which allows medical research to be carried out without dependence on the pharmaceutical industry or regulations that restrict innovation. More than merely a research funding system, however, RAHO Club applies the principle of cross-subsidization as a practical expression of the fifth principle of Pancasila, social justice for all the people of Indonesia. Members as research participants who contribute to research. RAHO Club is not merely a research community. It is also an ecosystem of solidarity in which every individual who benefits from nanobubble therapy contributes to the further development of the research. Members who undergo therapy automatically help fund research, technology development, and scientific documentation. Through these contributions, research can advance more rapidly than under a conventional academic model requiring large grants and lengthy bureaucracy. Transparency is a central part of the community. Members understand that the therapy they undergo also forms part of the advancement of science and of the hope offered to many other people. Cross-subsidization as an implementation of social justice. Under the present healthcare economy, many people cannot gain access to medical innovations because of financial limitations. RAHO Club addresses this problem through a cross-subsidy system intended to ensure that people in need can still receive therapy. Members who can afford to pay for therapy help finance treatment for those who cannot. Priority for subsidies is given to patients with serious medical conditions, including cancer, stroke, and degenerative disease, as well as to older people. Through this system, health is no longer an exclusive right of those who can afford it, but a right that can be accessed by everyone in accordance with the principle of social justice. This cross-subsidy model is presented as a practical implementation of the fifth principle of Pancasila, in which social justice is not merely a theoretical concept but is realized through practices that directly benefit the community. RAHO Club demonstrates that medical research need not always depend on grant funding or the interests of the pharmaceutical industry. It must be capable of becoming independent, sustainable, and grounded in national values. How can this be achieved? By having members contribute as research participants, research can proceed without the bureaucratic obstacles that slow innovation. Through cross-subsidization, medical innovation can be made available to those who genuinely need it without being obstructed by economic circumstances. By making social justice a foundational principle, health becomes a shared right rather than a privilege reserved for those with financial means. This approach is presented not only as a solution to the challenges of medical research in Indonesia, but also as an ideal model reflecting the nation's highest values in health and science. Toward independent innovation and national health resilience. Indonesia has celebrated 80 years of independence. During that period, the government has sent thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, of academics overseas to study at the world's leading universities. Trillions of rupiah in public funds have been invested in higher education and research. Yet a fundamental question remains: where are the results in health and medical innovation? Why, after 8 decades of independence, does Indonesia remain dependent on foreign technology and products to meet its national health needs? Why does no one demand results? The highest achievement of an academic should not merely be a scientific publication in a Q1 journal, but the implementation of an innovation that can benefit society. What happens in practice, however, is that Indonesia's research system prioritizes academic outputs over practical application. No one asks why research findings do not lead to innovative products that can be used by the public. Is this merely a weakness in the system, a shortage of human resources, or is there deliberate intent in the design of regulations that shackle innovation? Looking at the pattern of existing policies, the rules limiting medical innovation in Indonesia tend to keep the country dependent on foreign products. Every medical innovation must pass through a lengthy and expensive regulatory process that is almost impossible for independent scientists to navigate. Requirements such as GMP/CPOB for early-stage research burden scientists, so that only large companies with substantial capital can enter the health industry. As a result, Indonesia more often becomes a market for foreign health products than an independent producing nation. This system indirectly shackles the potential of Indonesian scientists, preventing them from developing and implementing their own innovations. If this situation is allowed to continue, Indonesia will remain permanently dependent on imported medical and pharmaceutical technologies. Indonesia's fragile health resilience. Indonesia's dependence on imports in the health sector is not merely an economic problem. It is also a serious threat to national resilience. Almost all pharmaceutical raw materials used in Indonesia are imported, including simple materials such as paracetamol and salicylic acid. The domestic pharmaceutical industry functions more as a tailor assembling imported materials than as an independent producer. If a third world war occurred, how long would Indonesia's medicine reserves last if global supply chains were disrupted? This is an extremely dangerous situation. A nation's resilience depends not only on military strength, but also on health and pharmaceutical resilience. If Indonesia cannot manufacture its own medicines, the country could be paralyzed during a crisis merely because it lacks access to essential medical materials. Nanobubbles, a solution for health technology independence. Amid Indonesia's dependence on imported pharmaceutical raw materials and health technology, nanobubbles are presented as a practical solution that can be produced almost entirely within the country. As much as 99% of nanobubble technology components can reportedly be manufactured in Indonesia, making it one of the medical innovations capable of genuine independence from global supply chains. Only infusion needles and certain gases still need to be imported. Other components, including nanobubble production equipment, can be produced locally. This advantage positions nanobubbles as a health technology that can genuinely belong to Indonesia, without dependence on imported pharmaceutical raw materials often controlled by larger countries. Compared with the conventional pharmaceutical industry, which is described as being almost entirely dependent on imported raw materials, nanobubble technology creates a major opportunity for Indonesia to build a more independent and sustainable health ecosystem. With nanobubbles, Indonesia can become not merely a user, but a producer of globally competitive medical technology. Conclusion: from dependence to independence, Indonesia currently stands at a crossroads in medical research and health resilience. We can continue along the conventional path that obstructs innovation, or we can open a new path through community-based research services that are more independent and have a direct impact on society. Nanobubble technology is presented as an example of how innovation can be developed domestically without dependence on the global pharmaceutical system. If Indonesia wishes to become an innovating and producing nation, it must have the courage to move beyond a system that shackles innovation. Community-based research services are not merely a solution for scientists, they are also a strategic step toward national health resilience. Becoming a pioneer, not a follower, nanobubble technology versus older technologies. Within academia, there is often a tendency to follow global trends without considering whether a technology truly adds value for Indonesia. Several Indonesian universities are currently conducting trials of nanomedicine based on extracellular vesicles, EVs, secretomes, and exosomes. These technologies are promising, but they were already being developed overseas more than 20 years ago. The question is, if we merely follow foreign scientists by importing their equipment, reagents, and technology, is it realistic to expect that we can surpass them? The risk of becoming merely a user of older technology. If we choose to pursue technology that has existed for 2 decades, several major risks must be faced. Total dependence on imports. Sophisticated equipment for EVs and exosomes comes from overseas. Reagents, raw materials, and analytical methods must also be imported, increasing dependence on foreign industries. We cannot become leaders, we can only become followers. More advanced nations mastered and patented these technologies long ago. Indonesian scientists will merely become users rather than innovators. The hope of becoming superior is unrealistic. If we merely follow established technologies, can we genuinely catch up with nations that started far earlier and are already much further ahead? Would it not be better to invest in a field in which Indonesia can become a leader? Nanobubbles, the technology that can make Indonesia a leader. Unlike EV and exosome technologies, which remain at an early stage in Indonesia, medical nanobubble technology is presented as more advanced and independently developed. Indonesia is described as a leader in medical nanobubble technology. The technology has reportedly been applied to more than 15,000 research participants, something the author states has not been done in other countries. In the years ahead, the author argues, Indonesia will not merely use this technology but will teach the world about nanobubbles. Why must we focus on nanobubbles? It is a new technology that has not yet been widely explored by other countries. 99% of its production can reportedly take place domestically, avoiding dependence on imports. Trials within the RAHO club community are said to have produced extraordinary effectiveness across various chronic diseases, outcomes the author states have not yet been achieved by exosome and EV technologies. If Indonesia wishes to become a nation taken seriously in science and medicine, it must focus on a field it can master and develop independently rather than merely following global trends already dominated by other countries. We do not need to become better at an old technology controlled by others. We only need to move faster in the new technology that we lead. Biotechnology, the future of health being shaped by technology giants. In recent years, the 7 largest technology companies in the world, often called the Magnificent Seven, have invested heavily in biotechnology. These companies include Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Nvidia, Meta, Apple, and Tesla. They all believe that biotechnology will become one of the most revolutionary industries of the coming decades. Examples of their major investments include Google, through DeepMind and Calico, is developing artificial intelligence for biomedicine and aging therapies. Microsoft is developing artificial intelligence for drug design and cancer therapy. Amazon is investing in AI-based pharmaceutical technology. Nvidia provides AI infrastructure for biotechnology research worldwide. Meta develops AI for protein structure prediction and personalized medicine. Apple invests in biometrics and wearable health technology. Tesla, through Neuralink, develops neurotechnology for medical intervention. All of this demonstrates that biotechnology is not merely a trend. It has already become a central focus of the world's largest companies. Nanobubbles, the biotechnology of the future in which we already lead. The work of IMI and RAHO Club in nanobubbles is presented as part of this biotechnology revolution. Nanobubbles are described not merely as a health innovation but as a biomedical technology enabling regenerative treatment, improved mitochondrial performance, and restoration of bodily homeostasis. The author argues that Indonesia is not simply following a trend, but is already at the forefront of this revolution before the rest of the world has recognized it. At the time of writing, nanobubbles are said to have been tested on more than 30,000 research participants, something the author states has not yet been done even by the world's technology giants. Indonesia has a major opportunity to become a leading global biotechnology player. If the world's largest technology companies have begun redirecting investment toward biotechnology, will Indonesia remain only a spectator? Indonesia has a rare opportunity to become a country that not only uses biotechnology from abroad, but also develops it independently. With nanobubbles, Indonesia is presented as already leading in a field of biomedical technology that remains largely unexplored by other countries. The technology can reportedly be developed almost entirely within Indonesia, with 99% locally produced components. If research and scientific documentation continue to develop, the author argues, the world will come to Indonesia to learn about this technology. We are not competing with the scientists of the past. We are building technology for the future. In other words, IMI and RAHO Club are presented not merely as participants in the global biotechnology revolution, but as pioneers in the field. Chapter 2. The Scientific Foundations of Nanobubbles. Why are nanobubbles needed in medicine? One of the principal causes of organ dysfunction is a reduction in the supply of gases and nutrients caused by obstruction of blood vessels. We often imagine blockages occurring in large arteries, as in coronary heart disease. In reality, however, the heart is only one of many organs possessing an extensive vascular network. Consider the anatomy of the human body. The heart has large arteries that may become blocked, but it also has a natural bypass system. The kidneys, pancreas, and liver have far more complex microvascular networks, with a total vascular length exceeding 100,000 kilometers, most of it consisting of capillaries. These capillaries are extremely small and are more easily obstructed than large arteries. Imagine the circulatory system as a plumbing system. If the same liquid passes through them, a large pipe is harder to obstruct than a small one. Capillary obstruction is therefore far more dangerous than obstruction of a large artery because capillaries are the principal routes through which oxygen and nutrients are distributed to cells. When they are obstructed, a very broad area of tissue can be affected. Unlike large arteries, capillaries do not have a bypass system capable of compensating for the obstruction. In conditions such as diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, and cancer, the effects of capillary obstruction often go unnoticed because they do not produce acute symptoms like a heart attack or stroke. Over the long term, however, the hypoxia caused by these blockages triggers chronic inflammation, organ dysfunction, and cellular degeneration. How do nanobubbles address this problem? Nanobubbles are said to work differently from conventional therapies because their ultra-small size, below 200 nanometers, allows them to penetrate obstructed capillaries. They possess an electrical charge that may help loosen microvascular obstructions through a mild cavitation effect. They can carry and deliver gases efficiently, supplying oxygen directly to hypoxic tissue. They do not depend entirely on the principal bloodstream and can therefore continue to reach tissue affected by obstruction. Nanobubble technology does not focus only on large arteries, as conventional therapy does, but also targets capillaries, which play the most crucial role in cellular function. In other words, where conventional treatment repairs only the large pipes, nanobubbles are presented as repairing the entire system down to its smallest level. This is a powerful and fundamental concept for understanding aging and organ degeneration associated with capillary obstruction. The following sections highlight the limitations of present medical technology in managing vascular obstruction and describe the new solution the author believes nanobubbles can offer. Limitations of medical technology in treating vascular obstruction. At present, humans can manage obstruction only in large blood vessels, such as the coronary arteries, arteries in the legs, and the carotid arteries in the neck. Catheterization technology makes this possible. A doctor can insert a catheter, or small tube, into a large artery. Procedures such as balloon angioplasty or insertion of a cardiac stent can then be performed. If the condition is too severe, bypass surgery can redirect blood flow through a new route. This technology, however, can treat only large blood vessels. What about capillaries? No catheter can enter an obstructed capillary. Current medical technology offers no way to open or clean it directly. Once it is blocked, gases, nutrients, enzymes, hormones, and stem cells cannot reach their intended target. Principal causes of obstruction: plaque, thrombus, and calcification. The principal causes of narrowing in blood vessels are known to include atherosclerotic plaque, thrombus or blood clot, and calcification. Strangely, treatment has generally focused on restoring blood flow rather than cleaning the blood vessel itself. Angioplasty and stents open an obstruction but do not completely remove the plaque. Bypass surgery redirects blood flow but does not resolve the underlying problem. Blood-thinning medicines help prevent new thrombi but do not clean away existing plaque. Why has there been no attempt to clean the blood vessels? The answer, according to the author, is simple: no technology has yet been able to do so effectively without risk. Present technology can deal with large pipes, but it cannot clean the much smaller capillary network. Obstructed capillaries slowly reduce organ function without producing obvious symptoms. Obstructed capillaries mark the beginning of aging. As capillaries begin to become obstructed, the supply of nutrients and oxygen to tissue declines. Consequently, the kidneys begin to lose function, leading to chronic kidney failure. The liver develops fibrosis, progressing to cirrhosis. The pancreas loses its capacity to produce insulin, resulting in diabetes. The brain degenerates because of inadequate oxygen, contributing to dementia and stroke. When organ function begins to decline, people call it aging. In English, we say that someone is getting old, in Mandarin, lao lu. But is this aging truly caused by chronological age, or by capillary obstruction that steadily accumulates over time? If aging results from a declining supply of oxygen and nutrients caused by obstructed capillaries, then the solution to slowing aging is not another drug, but a way to clean and reopen those capillaries. Nanobubbles are the solution. The author describes nanobubbles as the only current technology capable of targeting capillaries and cleaning them from within. They are said to operate through several distinctive mechanisms. Their extremely small size allows them to enter obstructed capillaries. A mild cavitation effect helps break down plaque and gradually remove obstruction. They can carry and deliver oxygen directly to cells made hypoxic by obstruction. They reduce blood viscosity and improve microcirculation without the bleeding risk associated with blood-thinning medicines. In other words, nanobubbles are presented not merely as improving blood flow, but also as regenerating tissue that has degenerated through chronic hypoxia. If capillary obstruction is a principal cause of aging, reopening those capillaries becomes the key to slowing and even reversing aging. Nanobubbles, the first reverse aging technology in the world. Many technologies claim to slow aging, but none, according to the author, truly reverses organ degeneration at its source. Imagine, however, a technology capable of cleaning plaque from capillaries, restoring oxygen and nutrient delivery to cells, and recovering the performance of organs that have begun to weaken. This is what the author calls the first reverse aging technology in the world. It is presented as not only extending lifespan, but improving health span by reopening obstructed capillaries so cells once again receive oxygen and nutrients optimally, restoring the function of organs previously damaged by chronic hypoxia, increasing ATP production in mitochondria so cellular energy resembles that of a younger person, facilitating tissue regeneration and enabling recoveries once regarded as impossible. Through these mechanisms, nanobubbles are described not as an ordinary medical treatment but as a biotechnology revolution that permits genuine physiological reversal of aging. Whereas humanity could previously only slow aging, the author argues that it can now regenerate the body and restore youthful vitality. Nanomedicine, the future of medicine and the RAHO innovation. For the past 20 to 30 years, many scientists have called nanomedicine the future of medicine. This approach uses nano-sized drug delivery systems capable of crossing barriers in the body, including the blood-brain barrier, liver and protein barriers that normally restrict foreign substances, blood and digestive barriers that often limit drug absorption. The limitation of conventional nanomedicine, toxicity. Despite its great potential, conventional nanomedicine faces a major obstacle, toxicity. Much nanomedicine research uses metallic materials, including gold nanoparticles and silver nanoparticles. These materials may serve effectively as drug carriers but can cause toxic accumulation in the body. Consequently, nanomedicine clinical trials are often delayed by serious adverse effects. Scientists have attempted to shift to polymer-based nanocapsules, which have lower toxicity but still have limitations. Development of nanomedicine therefore remains slow. In the United States, for example, a Phase 3 clinical trial has investigated a nanocapsule carrying a chemotherapy drug that is intended to be ruptured with ultrasound once it reaches the target cancer cell. The challenge remains the same: how can the long-term safety of such nanoparticles be assured? The RAHO approach, nanobubbles as non-toxic nanocapsules. RAHO takes an approach very different from conventional nanomedicine. It uses neither metallic materials nor polymers. Instead, it employs naturally formed gas nanocapsules called nanobubbles. Nanobubbles form because of the hydrophobic nature of gas, which naturally repels liquid and creates an ultra-small capsule. The wonder, according to the author, is that this is a virtual nanosystem. There is no solid material capable of causing toxic accumulation. The claimed advantages of nanobubbles as nanocapsules are: no solid material accumulates in the body, and therefore the author claims there is no toxicity. They can cross bodily barriers in a manner comparable to nanomedicine, but without adverse effects. They can carry gasotransmitters that naturally regulate bodily homeostasis. Through this approach, RAHO states that it has created the world's first gas delivery system, one that is safer, more efficient, and suitable for long-term therapy without the risk of toxic accumulation. Chapter 3. Nanobubbles and Mitochondria, the Heart of Life. Mitochondria, the body's energy engines. Every cell in the human body contains mitochondria, organelles commonly described as the cell's power plants. Mitochondria produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, the principal source of energy for every human biological function. One fact is often overlooked: mitochondria can function optimally only when they receive an adequate supply of oxygen. If cellular oxygen is disrupted by capillary obstruction, chronic inflammation, or metabolic dysfunction, ATP production declines. As a result, the body begins to lose energy, causing chronic fatigue. Organ function weakens because there is insufficient energy for cellular regeneration. Aging and degenerative disease accelerate as oxidative stress accumulates. Mitochondrial dysfunction has been associated with many diseases, including neurodegeneration, including Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Cancer, where inadequate oxygen is said to promote the Warburg effect. Premature aging and chronic fatigue syndrome. Metabolic diseases such as diabetes and obesity. Mitochondria also degenerate with age, their number falls and their efficiency declines. This is why people become weaker and more vulnerable to disease as they grow older. But what if a technology could restore mitochondrial function to an optimal condition? Nanobubbles, a proposed solution to mitochondrial dysfunction. Nanobubble technology is presented as a distinctive way to restore oxygen supply to mitochondria without depending entirely on the principal circulatory system. Oxygen nanobubbles, addressing hypoxia at the cellular level. Nanobubbles are said to penetrate capillaries and reach hypoxic cells. Oxygen carried in the nanobubbles can then be used directly by mitochondria to produce ATP. The author states that oxygen nanobubbles improve oxygen metabolism without generating excessive free radicals. This is contrasted with ordinary oxygen therapy, which may cause hyperoxia and increased oxidative stress. Nanobubbles are described as not merely raising oxygen levels, but optimizing the direct distribution of oxygen to the cells that require it. Hydrogen nanobubbles, suppressing oxidative stress. Hydrogen carried in nanobubbles is described as a selective antioxidant. H2 neutralizes hydroxyl radicals, OH, which are identified as a principal cause of mitochondrial damage. H2 is also said to prevent apoptosis caused by excessive oxidative stress. With a combination of oxygen and hydrogen nanobubbles, cells are said to return to optimal homeostasis, producing energy efficiently without increasing oxidative stress. The role of gasotransmitters, NO, CO, and H2S, in mitochondrial regulation. In addition to oxygen and hydrogen, nanobubbles may contain gasotransmitters such as nitric oxide, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide. Nitric oxide improves vasodilation and blood flow to mitochondria. Carbon monoxide is described as a regulator of cancer cell apoptosis and as an anti-inflammatory agent. Hydrogen sulfide is said to protect mitochondria from oxidative stress and prolong cellular life. The combination of these elements is presented as creating ideal conditions for cellular regeneration and restoration of mitochondrial function. The effects of nanobubbles on energy and vitality. By improving mitochondrial function, nanobubbles are said to have a direct effect on energy, vitality, and overall physical performance. Increasing ATP production. Providing the body with more energy for daily activity. Reducing chronic fatigue and increasing physical endurance. Improving recovery after exercise or injury. Slowing aging and improving cognitive performance. Improving brain function by increasing oxygen delivery to neurons. Reducing the risk of neurodegenerative disease by protecting brain mitochondria. Improving focus, memory, and mental clarity. Tissue regeneration and restoration of organ function. Accelerating wound healing and tissue repair. Improving the function of the heart, liver, kidneys, and pancreas by optimizing cellular energy supply. Supporting recovery from degenerative disease by stimulating cellular regeneration. These are among the reasons the author calls nanobubbles the first reverse-aging technology in the world. By restoring mitochondria, the body is said to return to a younger homeostatic condition, not merely in appearance but also in organ function and metabolism. Nanobubbles are described as a key to cellular regeneration and vitality. Mitochondria are central to human life, and maintaining their health is essential to preventing aging and chronic disease. By increasing the oxygen supply directly to mitochondria, nanobubbles allow more efficient ATP production. With hydrogen acting as an antioxidant, nanobubbles protect cells from oxidative stress. With gasotransmitters acting as regulators, nanobubbles help maintain metabolic balance. Nanobubbles are therefore presented not merely as a therapy, but as a revolution in the understanding of aging, cellular energy, and human health. Whereas aging could previously only be slowed, the author argues that this technology can reverse cellular degeneration and restore bodily vitality. This is presented as the key to reverse aging, restoring mitochondria, repairing capillaries, and regenerating cells from within. Autoregulation: how does the body regulate itself? The human body possesses a remarkable system for maintaining physiological balance automatically, without external intervention. This process is called autoregulation. Each organ adjusts its activity according to the body's needs. But how do these cells communicate with one another? According to the author, this communication does not occur only through electrical signals like those in nerves, but also through chemical reactions regulated by small gas molecules known as gasotransmitters. Two important examples are the regulation of insulin by the pancreas and the immune system's elimination of cancer cells. The pancreas and insulin regulation, the role of hydrogen sulfide. The pancreas regulates blood glucose through production of the hormone insulin. If blood glucose exceeds 120 mg per deciliter, the pancreas releases insulin to lower it. If blood glucose falls to approximately 80 mg per deciliter, the pancreas stops secreting insulin to prevent hypoglycemia. How does the pancreas know when to begin or stop releasing insulin? The author states that this process is regulated by the gasotransmitter hydrogen sulfide, H2S. H2S is described as having several principal roles in pancreatic autoregulation. Protecting pancreatic beta cells from oxidative stress so they can continue producing insulin optimally. Inhibiting expression of proteins that cause apoptosis, thereby keeping pancreatic cells healthy. Maintaining insulin balance by stimulating or suppressing secretion according to the blood glucose level. If H2S production is disturbed, this regulatory mechanism becomes disordered and may lead to insulin resistance or diabetes. Understanding the role of H2S, the author argues, shows how H2S nanobubbles might become an innovative diabetes therapy. Reference in the original, ResearchGate, the effect of hydrogen sulfide exposure on blood sugar. The immune system and elimination of cancer cells, the role of nitric oxide and carbon monoxide. The human body has natural mechanisms for eliminating damaged or abnormal cells, including cancer cells. Two principal processes are autophagy, the cellular cleaning system that removes damaged proteins or organelles. Yoshinori Osumi received the 2016 Nobel Prize for discoveries concerning mechanisms of autophagy. Apoptosis, programmed cell death through which damaged cells are destroyed and naturally removed. Who determines when a cell should die or be repaired? The author identifies the gasotransmitters NO and CO. Their proposed roles in regulating cancer cell apoptosis are described as follows. Nitric oxide activates apoptosis in cancer cells so they are destroyed before spreading. Inhibits autophagy in cancer cells, preventing them from surviving longer than they should. Maintains a balance between normal cell proliferation and destruction of abnormal cells. Carbon monoxide acts as an anti-inflammatory agent that controls the immune system's response to cancer cells. May modulate cancer cell death, although the mechanism remains under investigation. When regulation by NO and CO is disrupted, cancer cells may grow without control because they lose apoptotic signaling. Autophagy may become ineffective at removing damaged cells. By understanding NO and CO, the author proposes developing gasotransmitter-based therapies to restore the body's natural anti-cancer mechanisms. Reference in the original, PubMed, nitric oxide induces apoptosis in liver cancer cells. Gasotransmitters are presented as a key to bodily autoregulation. Nanobubbles, the only technology said to regulate gas hormesis in the body. Medical use of gasotransmitters such as NO, CO, and H2S has been limited because these gases may become toxic at high doses. Nanobubble technology is presented as a breakthrough in regulating gas hormesis because it releases gas pressure only in accordance with the capacity of body fluids to absorb it. The author argues that this enables nanobubbles to carry NO, CO, and H2S without causing the toxic effects associated with conventional delivery methods. Evidence from IC50 testing, making toxic gases safe. An IC50 test measures the concentration at which a substance inhibits 50% of cellular activity and is commonly used to assess toxicity. NO, CO, and H2S in pure gaseous form are ordinarily toxic to cells. In the IC50 testing described by the author using nanobubbles, all cells reportedly survived. Why? The author explains that nanobubbles do not force the body to receive excessive gas, but release it gradually in accordance with the absorptive capacity of body fluids. Thus, nanobubbles not only carry gas into the body, but regulate its release so that it remains within a hormetic zone considered safe and beneficial to cells. Claimed advantages of nanobubbles in gasotransmitter regulation. The claimed advantages include avoidance of toxicity because gas release follows the body's absorptive capacity. Potential for long-term use without the adverse effects associated with inhalation of pure gas. Imitation of the body's natural mechanism for managing gasotransmitters in autoregulation. For these reasons, the author calls nanobubbles the only technology capable of naturally regulating gas hormesis in the body and an ideal solution for therapies based on NO, CO, and H2S. Nanobubbles, a breakthrough in gas delivery systems. It is not easy to turn a gas into a therapy that can be administered in a measured dose. If gas is packaged in a capsule, it will leak and lose its effectiveness. If gas is placed in plastic or exposed liquid, it will rapidly evaporate and become difficult for the body to absorb. Common approaches currently rely on inhalation or administration of a precursor intended to stimulate the body to produce the gas naturally. Inhalation has major limitations because an inhaled gas may spread throughout the body without precise dose control. Its effects may be difficult to predict and may present a risk of toxicity. The author presents nanobubble system technology, or NBS, as the answer to these challenges and as the world's leading gas delivery system. How do nanobubbles solve the problem? Nanobubbles allow gas to remain stable in liquid without leaking or evaporating. Gas is released gradually according to the absorptive capacity of body fluids, providing greater dose control. Gas molecules released into the surrounding solution do not require a precursor or enzymatic synthesis within the body, so the effect is described as faster and more direct. Under this system, gases such as NO, CO, and H2S can, according to the author, be given in precise doses. This makes it the first gas-based therapy that can truly be measured and accurately controlled. NBS technology is presented not merely as a solution, but as a major leap in medical biotechnology that changes how gases are used therapeutically. Chapter 4. Nanobubbles for the treatment of chronic disease. Why are chronic diseases so difficult to cure? Chronic diseases such as stroke, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, and degenerative disorders are among the leading causes of death throughout the world. Yet conventional medicine has still not been able to cure these diseases completely. Why are chronic diseases so difficult to cure? The author's answer is that present medical therapies address symptoms rather than the underlying problem. Several principal factors are said to explain why chronic disease is difficult to overcome using conventional medical methods. Cellular hypoxia. Chronic disease often begins with an inadequate oxygen supply to cells, causing mitochondrial dysfunction and chronic inflammation. Nanobubbles are presented as overcoming this problem by penetrating small capillaries and carrying oxygen directly to hypoxic cells. Capillary obstruction. Stroke, heart disease, and diabetes are often attributed to obstruction in small capillaries that conventional therapies cannot reach. Nanobubbles are said to open obstructed capillaries and improve blood delivery to damaged tissue. Chronic inflammation. Autoimmune disease, cancer, and neural degeneration often involve an excessive and uncontrolled inflammatory response. Nanobubbles carrying gasotransmitters such as H2S, NO, and CO are said to regulate immune balance and relieve inflammation without excessively suppressing the immune system. Metabolic and hormonal imbalance. Diabetes and obesity result from disturbances in insulin regulation and energy metabolism. Nanobubbles are said to help the pancreas balance insulin production by improving mitochondrial function and normalizing pancreatic autoregulation. Through this approach, nanobubbles are presented as addressing not merely symptoms, but the root causes of chronic disease. Stroke, extending the golden time and regenerating the brain. Ischemic and hemorrhagic stroke. A stroke occurs when the blood supply to the brain is disrupted. This may result from ischemic stroke, which accounts for approximately 80% of cases and occurs when plaque obstructs a cerebral blood vessel, preventing red blood cells from passing through the capillaries. Hemorrhagic stroke, which accounts for approximately 20% of cases and occurs when a blood vessel in the brain ruptures and causes bleeding. In both situations, hypoxia is identified as the principal cause of brain damage. The conventional golden time for stroke is described as only 4 to 6 hours, after which brain damage is regarded as permanent. But what if that golden time could be extended to 24 hours or longer? Why has damaged brain tissue been considered irreversible? In medicine, brain tissue damaged by ischemic stroke is often considered incapable of recovery. The author attributes this to several factors. Obstruction in the capillaries is not removed, so oxygen and nutrients cannot reach the injured area. Present medical methods depend on emergency neovascularization, temporary formation of new blood vessels that is insufficient to support regeneration of brain tissue. Important regenerative materials, including stem cells and growth factors, cannot reach the ischemic area. As a result, severely hypoxic brain tissue does not receive enough material to regenerate and is consequently considered permanently damaged. Nanobubbles as stroke therapy, addressing the principal cause. In ischemic stroke, plaque obstruction prevents oxygen-carrying red blood cells from reaching the brain. Red blood cells are several micrometers in size and cannot pass through a complete obstruction. Nanobubbles are far smaller, in the nanometer range, but are said to carry large quantities of oxygen and other gases. Even where a blood vessel is completely blocked, the author states that nanobubbles can pass through the obstruction and deliver oxygen directly to hypoxic brain tissue. Through this mechanism, nanobubbles are presented as addressing the principal problem in stroke, lack of oxygen in the brain, rather than merely opening the obstruction in the manner of conventional therapy. Nanobubble cavitation bursts to break down calcified plaque. In addition to carrying oxygen, nanobubbles are said to possess a distinctive capacity to break down calcified plaque through cavitation bursts. Calcified plaque accumulated in cerebral blood vessels is said to become looser and dissolve gradually. Previously obstructed vessels can reopen, allowing normal blood supply to resume. Stem cells, growth factors, and other essential nutrients can then reach brain tissue that was previously blocked. Through the combined effects of oxygen delivery, plaque removal, and restoration of blood flow, nanobubbles are said to permit regeneration of brain tissue previously believed to have died from hypoxia. The author therefore describes nanobubbles as the only therapy capable of reviving brain tissue once considered permanently damaged. Evidence of recovery in brain tissue previously considered irreversible. Several RAHO research participants with stroke and ischemic brain injury classified medically as irreversible reportedly showed recovery after nanobubble therapy. The book states that perfusion MRI and HIF, or hypoxia-inducible factor, showed reactivation of brain tissue that had previously been ischemic. Cases at RAHO Club are said to show that stroke patients can recover after only 10 nanobubble sessions. Nanobubbles and the War on Cancer. The 50-year War on Cancer, have we won? In 1971, United States President Richard Nixon formally declared the War on Cancer. It was a major undertaking that directed enormous research funding, advanced technology, and medical innovation toward finding a cure. More than 50 years later, the author asks, have we won this war as we won the war against polio? Polio has almost disappeared from the world. But cancer? The number of people with cancer continues to increase. Chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy, and immunotherapy continue to be used, yet patients still relapse after treatment and remission. Treatment becomes increasingly expensive, but mortality changes little. The author uses deliberately provocative language to ask whether it is foolish to spend billions of dollars while continuing to use the same strategy and still losing the war. If we are losing, he argues, something must be wrong with the way the war is being fought. Why are we losing? We treat the consequence, not the cause. Imagine entering a bathroom and finding the floor wet. You conclude that water is leaking from a tap, so you place a bucket beneath it to keep the floor dry. Has the problem been solved? No. When the bucket fills, the floor becomes wet again. You replace it with a larger bucket, but the tap continues to drip. Would it not be more sensible to repair the tap than merely collect the leaking water? The author says this is precisely what has happened in the war on cancer. Cancer is described not as the principal cause, but as the consequence of something more fundamental, cellular hypoxia. Medicine is said to keep collecting the water with chemotherapy, radiation, and immunotherapy without repairing the cause. When cancer returns, it is because the root problem has not been addressed. Among nearly 400 cancer patients seen at RAHO Club, the book states that 75% had relapsed after conventional therapy. The author presents this not as coincidence, but as evidence that the prevailing strategy is mistaken. Cancer, our child forced to become a robber. The author identifies what he regards as a major mistake in the way cancer is understood. Cancer is often treated as though it were an external pathogen, like a virus or bacterium that must be destroyed. Yet cancer cells are not foreign organisms. They originate within our own bodies. A cancer cell was once a healthy, normally functioning cell. Because of an unhealthy environment, described here as hypoxia caused by capillary obstruction, it loses adequate access to oxygen and energy. To survive, it mutates and changes its metabolism. Imagine a child raised in a good family. He studies, works, and lives normally. One day he loses his job. He has no income and no food. Feeling he has no other choice, he begins stealing, deceiving, and even robbing. Was he evil from birth? No. He adapted to an environment that left him with no other way to survive. The author says the same is true of cancer cells. They were not evil cells from the beginning. They are our own cells deprived of oxygen and forced to change in order to survive. When they can no longer generate energy with oxygen, they become glucose robbers to remain alive. Is the best solution therefore to kill them with chemotherapy and radiation? Or would it make more sense to restore oxygen to the cellular environment so they no longer need to become malignant? This is presented as the essence of nanobubble therapy, not merely killing cancer, but restoring a healthy environment so cells no longer need to mutate into an aggressive form. Will we poison, burn, and cut our own child? The author asks the reader to reflect. Cancer cells are not an enemy from outside. They are not viruses, bacteria, or invading pathogens. They are part of us. Imagine again a child forced to steal and rob because he has lost his work and sees no other way to survive. Would we poison him to death? Would we burn him? Would we cut off parts of his body so he could no longer commit crimes? The author compares this to what is done to cancer cells through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, and surgery. Chemotherapy poisons the body, not only the cancer cell. Radiotherapy burns healthy tissue along with cancer cells. Surgery removes a tumor but does not resolve what the author regards as its underlying cause. If cancer is to be truly resolved, the author argues, cancer cells cannot simply be killed while leaving unchanged the environment that caused them to transform. Would it not be more sensible to restore healthy conditions so they no longer need to mutate into malignancy? Claimed evidence, cancer case studies at RAHO Club. RAHO Club reports cases in which nanobubble therapy changed the condition of patients previously considered to have little hope. Mr. Ganawan, advanced liver cancer. After 30 nanobubble treatments, his F4 liver fibrosis, described as end-stage cirrhosis, reportedly improved to F2 and his liver cancer became inactive. Mrs. SS, cancer of fatty tissue accompanied by a non-healing wound. A wound doctors had reportedly said would never heal was said to have recovered completely after 20 combination nanobubble infusions. A patient with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is commonly regarded as carrying a very poor prognosis. After several months of nanobubble therapy, the patient reportedly experienced significant improvement, greater energy, and reduced pain. Nanobubbles are therefore presented not merely as hope, but as a revolution in how cancer is understood. It is now or never. If we do not change, we will lose. If the present strategy against cancer were succeeding, cancer mortality should be falling dramatically. Yet the author cites Canadian Cancer Society figures stating that 2 out of 5 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer during their lifetime and 1 out of 4 will die from it. Each day, 675 people are diagnosed and 241 die. If the strategy is working, why do these figures continue to rise? The author concludes that the present war strategy has failed and that, unless it changes immediately, the war will be lost. He presents 2 choices. Continue with the old approach and accept that cancer will become increasingly widespread. Adopt a new approach that is said to address cancer's underlying cause through nanobubbles. History, he says, will record who chose the correct path. Will we remain victims of a mistaken strategy, or become pioneers of change? Diabetes, restoring insulin sensitivity and regenerating the pancreas. The role of H2S in insulin regulation. Diabetes occurs because the pancreas loses its capacity to produce insulin or because the body's cells cease to respond adequately to insulin. H2S is described as having important roles in maintaining balanced insulin secretion by the pancreas, protecting pancreatic beta cells from oxidative stress, restoring insulin sensitivity throughout the body. Reported results of nanobubble therapy in diabetes. A RAHO Club study is said to have reduced HbA1c from 8.5 to 9.5 to below 6 within 6 weeks. The original text gives the unit as mole/mole. Hypertension and heart disease, cleaning plaque and normalizing blood pressure. Atherosclerotic plaque is identified as a principal cause of hypertension and heart disease. The cavitation effect of nanobubbles is said to help clean plaque without surgery. The book reports that 85% of patients with hypertension return to normal after 25 treatment sessions. Autoimmune and degenerative disease, balancing the immune system and restoring cellular function. Nanobubbles are said to balance immune responses in autoimmune diseases such as lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. They are also said to reduce inflammation in the brain and assist people with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. A new paradigm in the treatment of chronic disease. Nanobubbles are presented as not merely relieving symptoms, but targeting the underlying causes of chronic disease. The technology is said to create new possibilities for recoveries previously considered impossible. The book repeats this central conclusion. Nanobubbles do not merely relieve symptoms, they target the underlying causes of chronic disease. The technology opens new possibilities for recoveries previously regarded as impossible. Chapter 5. Nanobubbles and diabetes, restoring insulin sensitivity and regenerating the pancreas. Diabetes, an increasingly uncontrolled problem. Diabetes is no longer a rare disease. Hundreds of millions of people throughout the world now live with it, and the number increases every year. Imagine a house with an effective drainage system. One day, however, a pipe begins to clog. Wastewater that should flow away smoothly starts to overflow, dirtying and gradually damaging the house. The author says this is what happens in the body of a person with diabetes. Diabetes is not merely high blood glucose, it is a problem of communication and energy distribution. Its underlying causes are described as microcapillary obstruction and disturbed pancreatic autoregulation. Yet, as in the war on cancer, the prevailing approach is said to manage symptoms instead of resolving causes. How does the pancreas regulate blood glucose? The pancreas is described as one of the most intelligent organs in the body. Its task is simple but essential. When blood glucose rises above 120 mg per deciliter, the pancreas releases insulin to lower it. When blood glucose falls below 80 mg per deciliter, the pancreas stops releasing insulin to prevent hypoglycemia. How does it know when to release insulin and when to stop? The author identifies gasotransmitters, small gaseous molecules that act as autoregulators within the pancreas, and particularly hydrogen sulfide, H2S. Without enough H2S, the pancreas is said to lose its ability to interpret blood glucose levels correctly. This is presented as one reason insulin resistance develops. If insulin is not released correctly, or the body does not respond to it, glucose continues to rise and diabetes results. Two principal problems in diabetes: production versus regulation. Diabetes is not merely a problem of high glucose, but a logistical and management problem within the body. Imagine the pancreas as an insulin factory. Two systems must work properly. Insulin production must be adequate, pancreatic beta cells must manufacture enough insulin. Insulin management must be accurate, insulin should be released only when needed and stopped once blood glucose stabilizes. If either system is disrupted, diabetes develops. Type 1 diabetes, the insulin factory cannot produce. Type 1 diabetes occurs when the pancreas loses its ability to produce insulin. It is compared to a factory that stops operating because raw materials are interrupted or its workers are ill or damaged. Three conditions are required for effective insulin production. Raw materials, including nutrients and oxygen, must reach the pancreas. Beta cells must remain healthy and capable of regeneration. The logistical system must function smoothly so the raw material supply is not disrupted. The author identifies obstructed capillaries as a major problem. If blood flow to the pancreas is impaired, beta cells receive insufficient oxygen and nutrients. Without raw materials, the pancreas cannot produce enough insulin. If this continues, beta cells may die and insulin-producing capacity may be lost completely. This is presented as the reason people with type 1 diabetes must depend on lifelong insulin injections. Their insulin factory can no longer operate. Type 2 diabetes, the factory works, but its management is chaotic. In type 2 diabetes, the pancreas can still manufacture insulin, but the body cannot use it properly. This is insulin resistance. Imagine a factory operating without a clear management system. No one knows when production should begin or stop. In the body, the author states, this management system is regulated by H2S. H2S acts as a communication signal between the pancreas and the body's cells. When it is present in sufficient quantities, the pancreas knows when to release insulin and when to stop. When H2S declines, the system becomes disordered and insulin resistance develops. Most H2S is said to be produced by beneficial intestinal bacteria. Poor diet, stress, and excessive antibiotic use reduce this production. Without enough H2S, the pancreas loses effective insulin regulation, leading to resistance and eventually type 2 diabetes. Hydrogen sulfide, a toxic gas that maintains glucose homeostasis. Hydrogen sulfide is commonly associated with the smell of flatulence or rotten eggs. It is toxic at high concentrations, yet in the human body small quantities play a vital gasotransmitter role. The pancreas and intestines produce it to regulate glucose homeostasis and the immune system. The problem is one of balance. If H2S is too high, it may become toxic to cells. If it is too low, the pancreas loses autoregulatory signaling, producing insulin resistance and metabolic imbalance. Nanobubble system technology is presented as the revolutionary solution. Nanobubbles and hormesis, controlled gas release. Hormesis is the biological principle by which a substance that is toxic at a high dose may be beneficial at a small, controlled dose. The author calls nanobubbles the only method capable of releasing H2S in a controlled manner according to bodily need. Nanobubbles are said to release only the quantity required. Unlike inhalation or precursor administration, NBS is claimed to prevent toxic effects while allowing full physiological benefit. Controlled H2S is said to help the pancreas read glucose levels more accurately, regulate insulin release, and restore insulin sensitivity in body tissues. The author presents this as a medical breakthrough, using a toxic gas as medicine without toxic risk. The nanobubble strategy for diabetes. As in the proposed cancer therapy, two principal strategies are described. Improving microcapillary flow and restoring oxygen to the pancreas. Nanobubbles are said to clean obstructed microvessels through cavitation. Restored blood flow allows beta cells to receive adequate oxygen and nutrients and resume normal function. Restoring pancreatic autoregulation with H2S. H2S nanobubbles help the pancreas interpret glucose more accurately. They restore balance between insulin production and release, allowing insulin resistance to improve naturally. The stated goal is not merely to control glucose, but to help the body repair its own regulatory system. Claimed evidence, a pilot trial at RAHO Club Switzerland. RAHO Club Switzerland in Surabaya reports conducting a pilot trial of HHO plus H2S nanobubble therapy in approximately 20 to 30 member participants. The reported results were described as highly promising. Within 1.5 months, HbA1c reportedly fell from 8.5 to 9.0 to below 6. The trial used HHO plus H2S nanobubble infusions to improve microcapillary circulation and restore pancreatic regulation. Consumption of H2S nanobubble water to support autoregulation of glucose homeostasis. The claimed success rate was approximately 80%. Many members with insulin resistance reportedly showed improved sensitivity, and some reduced their diabetes medication dose after regular therapy. In addition to lower glucose, the book reports improvements in liver function, kidney function, and blood pressure, which it interprets as a positive systemic effect. This is presented as evidence that diabetes is not necessarily irreversible. If the underlying problem is repaired, the body may again regulate glucose normally. Will we continue managing symptoms or address the cause? The book compares current diabetes treatment with the prevailing approach to cancer. It manages symptoms instead of resolving causes. Anti-diabetic medicines lower glucose but do not restore pancreatic function. Insulin injections help, but without beta cell regeneration the body remains dependent on external insulin. Strict diet helps, but does not, in the author's view, resolve capillary obstruction and gasotransmitter dysregulation. Will diabetes symptoms simply be treated for life, or will a solution be sought that addresses their cause? Nanobubbles are presented as an approach that does not merely manage diabetes, but helps restore natural bodily function. The author describes the situation as a critical turning point. Unless the approach to diabetes changes, society will remain trapped in an endless cycle. The chapter concludes. Diabetes is not merely high glucose, but a problem of communication and energy distribution. The pancreas may lose insulin regulation not only through genetics and diet, but through impaired gasotransmitter autoregulation. Microcapillary obstruction is said to contribute to insulin resistance and pancreatic insulin production failure. Nanobubbles are presented as working in two ways, cleaning microcapillaries and resetting pancreatic autoregulation with H2S. RAHO Club's reported results are said to show significant glucose improvement and pancreatic regeneration. To resolve diabetes, the author argues, medicine must stop merely managing symptoms and begin addressing causes, and he identifies nanobubbles as the solution. Chapter 6. Nanobubbles and Heart Disease, Freeing Obstructed Blood Vessels. Mr. Haru's Story, A Miracle in 10 Days. Mr. Haru, aged 68, arrived at RAHO Club barely able to move. Doctors had diagnosed coronary obstruction at 11 points, 2 were completely blocked and 5 or 6 were obstructed by 80 to 90%. Since 2007 he had struggled with worsening coronary heart disease. When he arrived, he could walk only 4 or 5 steps before stopping because of breathlessness and chest pain. His cardiologist's only recommendation was coronary bypass surgery. Like many patients, however, he feared the risks of major surgery and sought an alternative. On the first day of nanobubble therapy, after one infusion, he reported that sensation had begun to return to the soles of his feet, which had previously been numb. By the 10th day, after the 4th or 5th infusion, he could reportedly walk as far as 500 meters without severe chest pain. Everyone was astonished. It appeared impossible that completely obstructed blood vessels could become functional within only 10 days. Was this neovascularization? Dr. Subagio, SPBTKV, identified in the book as head of the research team at the Indonesian Molecular Institute, initially suspected that Mr. Haru's body had formed new small blood vessels to compensate for obstruction of the main vessels. The analogy was traffic being diverted from a congested motorway onto smaller roads. New vessel formation, however, normally requires weeks or months, not 10 days. How, then, could recovery occur so quickly? The team concluded that nanobubbles were delivering oxygen directly to tissue even while the principal vessels remained obstructed. Red blood cells, several micrometers in size, cannot pass through a total obstruction. Plasma and much smaller nanobubbles may still pass. Nanobubbles are said to carry substantial quantities of oxygen directly to tissue that had been hypoxic because of coronary obstruction. This was described as a moment of revelation. Nanobubbles not only clean blood vessels, but may rescue tissue from oxygen deprivation even where an obstruction remains complete. Why is heart disease the #1 killer? Heart disease is not merely a problem of high blood pressure or cholesterol. Its central problem, the author argues, is obstruction of blood vessels. When the main highway, the coronary artery, is blocked, oxygen and nutrient delivery to the heart is disrupted, causing chest pain or angina, breathlessness, reduced stamina and endurance, heart attack if the obstruction completely closes blood flow. Conventional medical treatment focuses on lowering cholesterol with statins, controlling blood pressure with antihypertensive drugs, inserting a stent or performing bypass surgery when disease becomes severe. The author states that none of these directly cleans obstructed vessels. This is presented as the difference between nanobubble therapy and other approaches. The nanobubble strategy, a revolutionary approach to obstruction. Two principal mechanisms are proposed. Breaking down plaque and thrombus through nanobubble cavitation bursts. Cavitation is said to break down calcified plaque and blood clots. Once vessels reopen, blood flow improves without bypass surgery or stent placement, delivering oxygen directly to tissue even while a vessel remains blocked. Because of their extremely small size, nanobubbles are said to cross obstructions that red blood cells cannot. Tissue may therefore continue receiving oxygen despite complete obstruction of a major vessel. In Mr. Haru's case, rapid recovery was attributed to relief of tissue hypoxia. The author presents this as an entirely new approach to heart disease treatment. Claimed evidence from other RAHO club cases. Besides Mr. Haru, many other patients are said to have improved substantially. People with coronary heart disease and previous breathlessness reportedly resumed normal activity without symptoms. Some people with hypertension improved after several treatments. Some who had depended on cardiac medication showed significant improvement in heart function. The book presents these reports as proof that nanobubble therapy is not merely theoretical but has produced visible results. Will we change how we confront heart disease? Heart disease treatment has focused on controlling blood pressure and cholesterol. But does this resolve obstruction? Must patients wait until disease becomes severe and bypass surgery is required? Nanobubbles are presented as a better solution, cleaning vessels without surgery and restoring oxygen directly to tissue. The author offers two choices: remain with an old approach that manages symptoms, or move to a new approach that addresses the root problem. The chapter concludes. Heart disease results not only from high blood pressure or cholesterol, but from vascular obstruction that disrupts oxygen delivery. Nanobubbles are said to work through two strategies: breaking down plaque or thrombus and delivering oxygen despite obstruction. Mr. Haru's case is presented as showing that recovery can occur rapidly because nanobubbles oxygenate tissue without depending entirely on an open vessel. RAHO Club reports improved cardiac health without invasive surgery. To truly address heart disease, the author says, treatment must address its cause rather than merely managing symptoms. Chapter 7. Nanobubbles and Degenerative Disease, Awakening Sleeping Brain Cells. The mystery of the disappearing brain. Why does cognitive function decline? Many people regard aging and degenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's as unavoidable. But must we accept that the brain inevitably declines with age? Imagine a city that was once busy and productive but has become lifeless. The buildings still stand, yet the electricity is off and the streets are empty. The city has not been destroyed, the infrastructure supporting it no longer functions. The author says this resembles the brain in degenerative disease. Brain cells may not all be dead, their supply of oxygen and energy may have stopped. Degenerative disease is therefore presented not as a death sentence. By restoring energy to the brain, sleeping cells may be awakened. This is where the proposed nanobubble revolution begins. What actually happens to the brain in degenerative disease? Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and dementia are said to share a principal feature: obstructed brain capillaries and declining oxygen and nutrient delivery. When this occurs, neurons lose energy and begin to degenerate. Brain cells responsible for memory, movement, and thought weaken. Remaining healthy tissue must work harder, causing progressive cognitive decline. A domino effect produces symptoms such as forgetting names and places, difficulty speaking or understanding, loss of balance and coordination, and the tremor and rigidity of Parkinson's disease. If obstruction and declining oxygen are the main cause, the author says the solution is clear: restore oxygen and energy flow to the brain. The nanobubble strategy, reviving the sleeping brain. Two principal strategies are proposed: breaking down plaque and cleaning cerebral microcapillaries through cavitation. Cavitation is said to break down beta-amyloid plaque associated with Alzheimer's and protein aggregates in the brain. Reopening microcapillaries restores oxygen and nutrients to neurons, delivering oxygen and gasotransmitters for brain regeneration. Nanobubbles carry oxygen directly to the brain despite obstruction. Gasotransmitters such as NO, H2, and CO support autoregulation and stimulate neural regeneration. Hydrogen, described as a selective antioxidant, protects neurons from oxidative stress, a major accelerator of brain degeneration. Nanobubbles are therefore said not only to stop progression, but to allow recovery of brain function. Claimed evidence, my mother smiled again. Parkinson's disease is commonly regarded as a lifelong condition. The author recounts his mother's experience after nearly 2 years of severe Parkinson's disease. Tremor of her hands and mouth progressively worsened. Her face became expressionless, described as a masked face. She could only lie in bed and depended entirely on other people. Conventional treatment, he says, managed symptoms with dopamine medication without addressing the cause. The family then tried nanobubble system therapy. After 50 infusions, he reports, she began carrying out activities by herself. Her expressionless face could smile again. She could walk again. A person confined to bed for 2 years reportedly regained a more independent life. The author asks how this was possible. Nanobubbles addressed the proposed root cause of Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease involves insufficient dopamine in the brain. Why is dopamine production inadequate? The author's answer is obstruction of microcapillaries. Dopamine is produced by nerve cells in the substantia nigra. If blood flow to this area is impaired, the raw materials required for dopamine production cannot arrive. Production falls, leading to tremor, rigidity, and loss of facial expression. Nanobubbles are said to clean brain capillaries, restore blood and oxygen delivery to dopamine-producing regions, and carry gasotransmitters such as NO and H2 that support nervous system autoregulation. With nutrients restored, the brain is said to resume dopamine production. The aim is described not merely as reducing symptoms, but rebuilding a disrupted system. Neurodegenerative diseases, merely different locations of capillary obstruction. If Parkinson's disease results from impaired dopamine production in the substantia nigra, could Alzheimer's and dementia arise from the same underlying process in different brain regions? The author says this is highly possible. A common pattern is proposed. Cerebral microcapillary obstruction. Reduced oxygen and nutrient delivery to a particular brain region. Impaired neurotransmitter production and resulting neural dysfunction. The book provides the following comparison. Parkinson's disease, substantia nigra, responsible for movement control, dopamine is disrupted. Alzheimer's disease, hippocampus and cortex, responsible for memory and cognition, acetylcholine is disrupted. Dementia, frontal and temporal lobes, responsible for information processing, glutamate and GABA are disrupted. Nanobubbles are said to address these problems by cleaning cerebral microcapillaries, delivering oxygen to hypoxic brain tissue, and restoring the raw materials required for neurotransmitter production. Through this mechanism, the author proposes that nanobubbles could assist not only Parkinson's disease but also cognitive recovery in Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Are neurodegenerative diseases incurable? Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, and dementia are commonly described as incurable. The author challenges that conclusion. Why are they called incurable? Current medicine focuses on symptom management. Parkinson's medication supplies or imitates dopamine and delays symptoms, but does not repair the proposed cause. Alzheimer's medicines slow memory decline, but do not restore brain function. Dementia therapies reduce effects but do not reverse the condition. Scientists often assume dead neurons cannot recover. No therapy is said to resolve the cerebral microcapillary obstruction identified here as the main cause of hypoxia. If the cause is brain hypoxia, can it not be reversed? The discussion concerns not neurons that are already dead, but neurons described as sleeping because they lack oxygen and nutrients. If microcapillary obstruction is cleaned, could their energy supply return? If they again receive oxygen and neurotransmitter raw materials, could they regain function? The book compares this to a lamp that is dark not because the bulb is broken but because the electrical supply has been cut. Repair the electrical line and the lamp shines again. Restore blood flow to the brain, the author says, and neurons may function again. Turning an incurable disease into a reversible condition. Nanobubbles are described as operating in 4 ways not previously combined by other therapies. Opening obstructed microcapillaries through cavitation bursts. Delivering oxygen directly to hypoxic brain tissue. Restoring raw materials for neurotransmitters such as dopamine, acetylcholine, and glutamate. Preventing oxidative stress with gasotransmitters such as NO and H2 that participate in neural regulation. If oxygen and nutrients can be restored, the author asks, why must neurodegenerative disease still be considered incurable? Perhaps medicine has simply been looking in the wrong direction. Case reports, when impossible recovery becomes reality. RAHO Club reports substantial improvement in people previously considered incapable of recovery. The author's mother, severely affected by Parkinson's for 2 years, reportedly walked and smiled again after 50 sessions. Some people with Alzheimer's who had lost memory reportedly began remembering again. People with dementia and difficulty speaking reportedly responded more effectively in conversation. If the diseases were truly incurable, the author asks, how could this occur? Perhaps the problem is not that recovery is impossible, but that the strategy has been wrong. The chapter reiterates that neurodegenerative disorders are called incurable because current medicine manages symptoms rather than causes. If their cause is microcapillary obstruction and cerebral hypoxia, the author argues that the condition is not permanent and can be repaired. RAHO Club's cases are presented as evidence that recovery is possible. Multiple system atrophy, can this neurodegenerative disease improve? Multiple system atrophy, or MSA, is a rare neurodegenerative disease affecting motor, autonomic, and cognitive systems. Medicine regards it as incurable and progressive. RAHO Club, however, reports 7 participants over the age of 56, the oldest 73, all improved significantly after nanobubble therapy. One participant, Mr. Setiawan, reportedly recovered sufficiently to return to work and hiking. How could a disease described as progressive and incurable improve? MSA as a microcapillary problem across several systems. MSA resembles Parkinson's disease but affects more bodily systems. Symptoms include tremor, rigidity, and difficulty walking. Autonomic disturbance, including unstable blood pressure, difficulty swallowing, and bladder problems. Cognitive decline in some cases. It involves degeneration in the basal ganglia, cerebellum, and brainstem. The author nevertheless proposes the same pattern as in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia. Microcapillary obstruction in the brain and central nervous system. Reduced oxygen and nutrient delivery to affected regions. Disturbed production of dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. If disrupted oxygen and nutrient delivery is the principal cause, reopening the microcirculation should logically permit improvement. 2 mechanisms are described. Cleaning obstructed microcapillaries through microcavitation, restoring circulation in the brain and autonomic nervous system. Restoring neurotransmitter regulation and neural function through NO and CO, while hydrogen acts as a selective antioxidant protecting neurons from oxidative stress. The book confirms that MSA is a neurodegenerative disease affecting several nervous systems and resembling Parkinson's disease but with wider effects. It is normally considered progressive and irreversible, yet RAHO Club's cases are said to show improvement. All 7 participants reportedly improved, and Mr. Setiawan returned to work and hiking. The author presents this as evidence that neurodegenerative recovery is possible when the root problem is addressed. Perhaps, he says, the disease was not impossible to treat, the strategy had simply been wrong. Preventing neurodegenerative disease with nanobubble infusions. Can Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia be prevented before they develop? If their common root is cerebral microcapillary obstruction, the author argues that prevention should be possible by maintaining blood flow from an early stage. Nanobubble infusions are said to keep microcapillary circulation clean. They are intended to remove obstruction before it becomes severe and thereby prevent cerebral hypoxia. Stable circulation is said to maintain neurotransmitter production and protect nerve cells from degeneration. If microcapillaries are cleaned early, could neurodegenerative diseases be prevented rather than merely treated after onset? Nanobubbles are presented as the answer for preserving brain health into old age. The chapter repeats that degenerative disorders arise from microcapillary obstruction and reduced oxygen, that brain cells may be deprived rather than completely dead, and that nanobubbles combine plaque cleaning with delivery of oxygen and gasotransmitters. RAHO Club reports are said to show that people with degenerative disease can regain much of their brain function. The choice, the author concludes, is either to allow the brain to continue declining or to act to restore its function with nanobubble technology. Chapter 8. Nanobubbles and autoimmune disease, resetting a disordered immune system. Autoimmune disease, when the body attacks itself. Imagine an army created to protect a country suddenly attacking its own citizens. Instead of fighting an enemy, it destroys its own cities. This is the book's analogy for autoimmune disease. The immune system should protect the body from bacteria, viruses, and cancer cells, yet it begins attacking healthy cells. Rheumatoid arthritis causes severe joint inflammation. Lupus causes the immune system to attack multiple organs, producing chronic fatigue and organ dysfunction. Psoriasis causes immune cells to attack the skin, producing inflammation and thick red patches. In type 1 diabetes, the immune system attacks insulin-producing pancreatic beta cells. Why does the immune system become an enemy? Medicine has not established a single cause, but the author identifies a pattern. The immune system loses its ability to distinguish an enemy from the body's own cells. Chronic inflammation becomes a principal trigger. Gasotransmitters such as H2S, CO, and NO participate in maintaining immune balance. If autoimmune disease arises from immune imbalance, the proposed solution is not merely to suppress immunity but to restore balance. Can autoimmune disease be cured? Current treatment focuses on suppressing the immune system. Corticosteroids suppress inflammation but may cause serious long-term adverse effects. Immunosuppressants reduce attacks on the body but increase the risk of infection and cancer. Biological antibody therapies block selected immune responses but do not resolve the proposed underlying cause. The author asks whether immune balance might be reset rather than continuously suppressed. This question forms the basis of the nanobubble approach described here. How are nanobubbles said to address autoimmune disease? Two mechanisms are proposed. Regulating immune balance with gasotransmitters. H2S reduces excessive inflammation and restores balance among immune cells. Microdoses of CO are said to discourage immune attacks on the body's own cells. NO helps regulate macrophages and lymphocytes so they do not become hyperactive. Cleaning microcapillaries to interrupt chronic inflammation. Many autoimmune episodes are attributed to tissue hypoxia caused by microcapillary obstruction. Nanobubbles are said to restore circulation to affected tissue and reduce chronic inflammation. With adequate oxygenation, immune cells are said to leave a persistent, high-alert state and stop attacking the body. The intended effect is not blind immune suppression, but natural rebalancing. Reported autoimmune recoveries at RAHO Club. RAHO Club reports substantial improvement in several participants. People with rheumatoid arthritis who had difficulty moving because of joint pain reportedly resumed normal activity. People with lupus and frequent flare-ups reportedly experienced fewer attacks after regular nanobubble therapy. People with psoriasis reportedly showed significant skin improvement after several weeks. The author asks why improvement would occur if autoimmune disease were truly incapable of recovery, and suggests that symptom management has been mistaken for treatment of the cause. Changing how we confront autoimmune disease. People with autoimmune disease are often told to live with it permanently and depend on medicines with long-term adverse effects. The author asks, instead of suppressing the immune system, why not restore its balance? Instead of lifelong steroids and immunosuppressants, why not remove the cause of chronic inflammation? Instead of managing symptoms, why not resolve the underlying problem? Nanobubbles are presented as a new paradigm aimed at the root of autoimmune disease rather than indiscriminate immune suppression. Case study: myasthenia gravis reportedly resolved after nanobubble therapy. Anne, a 24-year-old woman, suffered a sudden attack in Singapore that left her unable to breathe. Doctors diagnosed myasthenia gravis, an autoimmune disorder affecting communication between nerves and muscles and capable of causing extreme weakness and respiratory failure. After stabilization, she received standard autoimmune treatment and was told she would need lifelong immunosuppressants. Seeking an alternative, she began a program involving HHO and NO nanobubble infusions intended to reset immune balance. Intermittent fasting intended to support detoxification and cellular regeneration. Pro-EM1 probiotics intended to support intestinal microbiota involved in immune regulation. The book reports that after 20 sessions her Singapore doctors began reducing medication. After 40 sessions, she was reportedly assessed as fully recovered and no longer required immunosuppressants. The case is presented as evidence that autoimmune disease need not be a lifelong sentence if the underlying imbalance is corrected. The chapter concludes that autoimmune disease arises when immune balance is lost, current treatment suppresses rather than resets the system, and nanobubbles are said to combine gasotransmitter regulation with restoration of microcirculation. The reader is offered a choice between lifelong immune suppression and a strategy claimed to address the cause. Chapter 9. Nanobubbles and Metabolism, Optimizing Human Energy and Vitality. Why does the body lose energy over time? Many people remember having abundant energy when young but later becoming easily tired and slow to recover. Aging is accompanied by fatigue even after light activity, longer recovery after illness or exercise, slower metabolism, fat accumulation, and difficulty maintaining weight, declining physical and mental performance despite diet and exercise. The author asks whether this is simply natural aging or whether the process can be reversed. The body's energy source, ATP and the Krebs cycle. Every cell requires energy, principally in the form of ATP. ATP is the fuel used in nearly all life processes and is produced in mitochondria through the Krebs cycle. The book states that with sufficient oxygen, one glucose molecule yields 36 to 38 ATP, whereas inadequate oxygen permits only 2 ATP through anaerobic glycolysis. The greater the oxygen supply, therefore, the more efficient the body's energy production. With age, capillaries carrying oxygen are said to become progressively obstructed, producing increasing mild hypoxia. Mitochondria receive too little oxygen for optimal ATP production. The body relies more heavily on inefficient anaerobic metabolism. Energy falls, metabolism slows, and signs of aging appear. If cellular oxygen deficiency is the root problem, the proposed solution is to maintain optimal oxygen delivery. This is the role assigned to nanobubbles. How are nanobubbles said to optimize metabolism? Two strategies are described. Opening capillaries to maximize mitochondrial oxygen delivery. Nanobubbles are said to clean microcapillary obstructions so oxygen reaches all cells. Mitochondria then resume optimal ATP production. Energy rises, metabolism accelerates, and the body feels younger. Delivering gasotransmitters that improve mitochondrial function. NO dilates vessels and increases oxygen supply. Microdoses of CO regulate energy metabolism and mitochondrial efficiency. H2 protects mitochondria from free radical injury and slows cellular aging. Nanobubbles are therefore presented as increasing energy while naturally slowing aging. Reported recovery of energy and performance at RAHO Club. Many RAHO members reportedly experience striking increases in energy. People who previously tired easily said they could remain active throughout the day. Some members over 60 reported stamina resembling that of their 40s. Athletes reported faster recovery and improved physical performance. If aging results from declining oxygen and cellular energy, the author argues that restoring oxygen should logically reverse part of the process. Will we surrender to aging or change it? Aging is usually considered unavoidable, but the author asks whether it is caused only by time or by loss of cellular energy. If energy falls because oxygen declines, why not restore oxygen? If metabolism slows because ATP production is limited, why not repair mitochondrial energy supply? If the body weakens because microcapillaries are obstructed, why not clean them and awaken sleeping cells? The chapter concludes that ATP production depends on oxygen, age-related microcapillary obstruction causes hypoxia, nanobubbles are said to clean capillaries and deliver oxygen to mitochondria, and the resulting improvement in energy and metabolism may reverse signs of aging. Aging is framed not simply as time passing, but as failure of energy delivery that may be slowed or reversed when supply is restored. Chapter 10. Nanobubbles and Sport, Improving Athletic Performance and Recovery. Why can athletes not always maintain peak performance? Many athletes experience a peak and crash, exceptional performance early in their careers, followed by decline, more frequent injury, slower recovery, and reduced stamina despite continued training. The author asks whether this is only age or a correctable biological factor. A principal factor is said to be declining oxygen delivery to muscles and the brain. If oxygen delivery could be improved, might peak performance be maintained longer? Oxygen and energy in athletic performance. Exercise uses two principal pathways. Aerobic metabolism, with oxygen, is said to produce 36 to 38 ATP per glucose molecule. Anaerobic metabolism produces only 2 ATP and generates lactic acid associated with muscle fatigue. Athletes with better oxygen supply can produce more energy efficiently, tire less quickly, and clear lactic acid faster. If capillaries supplying muscles become obstructed, the author asks, does this explain increasing fatigue with age? How are nanobubbles said to improve performance? 2 mechanisms are proposed. Improving oxygen delivery to muscles and the brain by cleaning microcapillaries, thereby increasing strength, stamina, and endurance. Reducing inflammation and accelerating injury recovery. H2 acts as an antioxidant, NO dilates vessels and improves muscle blood flow, and microdoses of CO regulate oxidative stress and support tissue regeneration. The claimed result is longer peak performance and faster recovery. Reported athletic results. Athletes at RAHO Club reportedly experienced faster recovery after heavy training, greater endurance, and faster healing of muscle injuries. Some former professionals approaching retirement reportedly improved. The author asks whether optimal oxygen and nutrient delivery might extend an athletic career. Changing how athletes train and recover. Sport still relies on intensive training, supplements, nutrition, physical therapy, and cryotherapy. The author argues that none directly addresses microcapillary obstruction. Nanobubbles are presented as restoring cellular oxygen, accelerating recovery, and extending careers. Nanosport science. Oxygen efficiency, vasodilation, stress regulation, and androgen balance are described as central to athletic performance. Nanosport science is the author's term for using nanobubbles to optimize these functions. High-concentration oxygen nanobubbles are said to improve VO2 max and endurance. NO and CO nanobubbles are said to dilate vessels and improve muscular oxygen uptake without requiring faster breathing. NO, CO, and H2S are said to influence androgen hormones such as testosterone, supporting strength, recovery, relaxation, and focus. The approach is described as biological optimization rather than doping. Engineering athletic performance. The book argues that elite sport is never entirely natural. Advanced countries already use nutrition, recovery technology, biotechnology, artificial hypoxia, oxygen therapy, and hormone-related methods. It asks why Indonesia should not employ a supposedly more natural technology such as nanobubbles. Biological optimization without a doping trace. The author states that nanosport science only optimizes substances already present in the human body, introduces no synthetic compound, and leaves no detectable doping trace. This is contrasted with EPO, anabolic steroids, and blood doping. Nanobubbles are said to improve oxygen efficiency without pharmacological manipulation, while NO, CO, and H2S act as natural regulators. The author calls this not cheating, but restoration of the body to its best natural condition. The future of sport, technology versus human limits. Modern sport depends not only on talent but access to technology. If nanobubbles can improve performance, extend careers, and accelerate recovery without breaking rules, the author argues that they represent a revolution in sport science. In competition, fractions of a second matter. Future athletes who understand biotechnology may possess a decisive advantage. Chapter 11. Nanobubbles and Skin Health, the Secret of Anti-Aging from Within. Why does skin age? Skin aging is often blamed on sunlight, pollution, and inadequate care, but the author identifies internal causes: declining oxygen supply, poor microcirculation, impaired nutrient delivery and waste removal, and oxidative damage to collagen and elastin. If the root problem is poor oxygen and microcirculation, the author asks, can it be treated from within? How are nanobubbles said to work for skin? 2 mechanisms are described. Cleaning skin microcapillaries to improve oxygen delivery and accelerate cellular regeneration, producing brighter and healthier skin. Using gasotransmitters to reduce oxidative stress, H2 protects against free radicals, microdoses of CO reduce inflammation and support wound healing, and NO improves vascular elasticity and skin radiance. Reported skin improvements. RAHO members reportedly experienced brighter skin, fewer wrinkles and fine lines, faster healing of wounds and acne scars, and restored elasticity after 30 to 50 sessions. The author presents these reports as consistent with correction of oxygen deficiency and oxidative stress. Nanobubbles versus conventional skincare. Conventional skincare is described as surface treatment, creams and serums, temporary fillers or Botox, and laser or chemical procedures that may irritate tissue. Nanobubbles are presented as working internally, cleaning microcapillaries and supporting natural cellular repair without harmful chemicals, with longer-lasting effects because regeneration occurs at cellular level. Changing how we care for skin. The author asks why skin care should remain surface-based when oxygen, oxidative stress, and microcapillary obstruction arise within the body. The chapter concludes that nanobubbles offer anti-aging from within, and repeats that RAHO reports show healthier, brighter, younger-looking skin. Readers are offered a choice between conventional surface treatments and deeper cellular regeneration. Chapter 12. The irony, aspiring to be a great nation while health resilience remains fragile. Indonesia, a giant market without its own production. Indonesia, the world's fourth most populous country with more than 275 million people, is described as a market rather than a producer in pharmaceuticals. More than 90% of essential active pharmaceutical ingredients are said to be imported, principally from China and India. Domestic factories are compared to tailors that assemble imported materials into finished products. How can a nation of this size lack health sector independence? In war or global crisis, how long could it survive without medicine supplies? War without bullets, how Indonesia could lose without being shot. Modern conflict need not involve missiles or armies. In an economic or geopolitical confrontation, Indonesia could be defeated simply by interruption of medicines. If China and India stopped exporting ingredients for 6 months, antibiotics, insulin, paracetamol, and other essentials would become scarce. People with diabetes, hypertension, kidney failure, and other chronic diseases could lose access to medicine. Minor infections could become fatal without antibiotics. The health system could collapse without a single bomb being dropped. The author argues that this vulnerability may be more dangerous than conventional war. The people demand accountability. The book asks how long this problem has been known, how many trillions of rupiah have been spent on education and research, and why pharmaceutical independence remains absent. Thousands have studied biotechnology abroad and research budgets have increased, yet imports still dominate. The author calls on citizens to challenge mismanagement and demand a system capable of genuine national health resilience. Nanobubbles as a first step toward biotechnology independence. Nanobubble technology is offered as new hope because the book claims that 99% of its production inputs can be made domestically and it does not depend on imported pharmaceutical ingredients. Indonesia, the author argues, cannot be truly independent while dependent on imported medicines. The chapter calls for action before crisis arrives and repeats. Indonesia is a large pharmaceutical market without production independence. More than 90% of ingredients are imported. War or global crisis could interrupt supply and create a national health emergency. Citizens are entitled to demand better management. Nanobubbles could begin a path toward independent health technology. Will Indonesia remain a market forever, or fight for independence? Chapter 13. The Future of Biotechnology and Indonesia's Health Revolution. The Future of Biotechnology and Indonesia's Health Revolution. The world is investing heavily in biotechnology. The world is entering a new health and biotechnology era. Major technology companies invest billions because health is an industry of the future, aging populations will demand more therapy, and AI, nanotechnology, and gene-based treatments may transform medicine. If advanced nations are focusing on biotechnology, the author asks, will Indonesia remain a spectator? A strategic mistake, pursuing old technology and ignoring new innovation. Indonesian universities are researching extracellular vesicles, secretomes, and exosomes, but these have been studied abroad for more than 20 years. Following them requires imported equipment and reagents and keeps Indonesia a market. Medical nanobubbles, the author argues, are a field other nations do not yet possess at the same level and have already been used in more than 15,000 RAHO participants. Why not lead instead of chase another country's innovation? Indonesia can lead global biotechnology. Nanobubbles are presented as a technology the world does not yet have, tested in thousands, made mostly from domestic inputs, and capable of changing medical and pharmaceutical paradigms. Leadership could make Indonesia a global research center, cause other countries to learn from Indonesia, and reduce the power of global pharmaceutical industries over national health. But action must begin now. From consumer to producer. The proposed revolution requires Indonesia to stop being only a foreign pharmaceutical market, build its own research and industrial ecosystem, prioritize technology it can lead, and independently manufacture medical inputs and therapies. Nanobubbles are called the first step. Success would make Indonesia a producer of advanced therapies, a pioneer of nanobubbles and reverse aging, and a stronger economy and nation. Creating our own ocean. The book contrasts the crowded, red ocean with the less contested, blue ocean, then rejects both. Not in the red ocean, not in the blue ocean, we are creating our own ocean. It also uses the proverb, be the head of an ant, not the tail of a whale. Copying other nations leaves Indonesia following behind, creating its own technology allows it to set direction. Nanobubbles are presented as an opportunity to create an entirely new biotechnology ocean. The responsibility of leaders, our fate is in your hands. The author entrusts his life, family, friends, and fellow citizens to democratically chosen leaders. Their decisions will determine whether Indonesia becomes independent and innovative or remains dependent. Leadership is not merely holding office but making courageous decisions for the future. The author asks leaders to protect and develop domestic innovation rather than allow bureaucracy, vested interests, or foreign dependence to extinguish it. Golden Indonesia 2045 requires health resilience. Indonesia's ambition to become a developed, golden Indonesia by 2045 cannot be achieved with fragile health resilience. Economic and military power are insufficient if medicines and essential technology remain imported. A healthy, productive population and independent biotechnology are described as foundations of national strength. China, power does not come only from weapons. China is presented as an example of a nation that built strength through industrial capacity, science, supply chains, and health technology, not merely weapons. Its control of pharmaceutical ingredients gives it geopolitical influence. The lesson for Indonesia, become a producer. Indonesia must learn to manufacture rather than merely consume, protect its intellectual property, finance domestic research, and turn discoveries into products used by society. Lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic exposed dependence on imported equipment, ingredients, vaccines, and supplies. China could mobilize production while Indonesia suffered shortages and disruption. The lesson is that health resilience is part of national security. Why Indonesia must change. The chapter closes with an urgent appeal. Continuing as a consumer means continuing dependence. Supporting nanobubble research is framed as an opportunity to create a national biotechnology industry, improve health, generate economic value, and establish Indonesia as a global innovator. Chapter 14. Nanobubbles, the future of medicine. Why is nanomedicine predicted to be the future? Nanomedicine has long promised targeted delivery, passage through biological barriers, smaller doses, and reduced injury to healthy cells. Yet toxicity has obstructed development. Hope obstructed by toxicity. Metallic gold and silver nanoparticles can accumulate and are difficult to eliminate. Polymer systems remain under investigation, and no nanomedicine has yet become the universal therapeutic standard envisioned by advocates. The author asks whether a toxicity-free nanoscale therapy is possible and answers, nanobubbles. Nanobubbles as a new nanomedicine breakthrough. Unlike solid nanomaterials, nanobubbles are gas nanocapsules formed through hydrophobic behavior. Because no solid material is present, the author claims there is no toxic accumulation. They may carry O2, H2, NO, CO, and H2S into cells and cross barriers because of their small size. Nanobubbles are therefore presented as solving the toxicity that restrains metallic and polymer nanomedicine. Medical applications reported at RAHO Club. The book repeats reported applications. In cancer, oxygenation and NO or C are said to influence hypoxia and apoptosis. In stroke, oxygen is said to reach affected brain regions despite obstruction and support recovery of tissue considered irreversible. In diabetes, H2S is said to support pancreatic autoregulation and insulin sensitivity. In neurodegeneration, nanobubbles are said to clean cerebral capillaries, improve oxygen delivery, and restore neurotransmitter function. The author regards use in thousands of participants as evidence that nanobubbles represent the future of nanomedicine. The first true gas delivery system in medicine. Gas is difficult to package, retain, absorb, and dose. Pills leak, ordinary liquids lose gas, and inhalation or precursors are difficult to control. Nanobubbles are described as a highly controlled gas delivery system that releases gas according to the absorptive capacity of body fluids. The book claims no other technology regulates therapeutic gas as accurately. Conclusion. Nanomedicine's promise has been delayed by toxicity. Nanobubbles are presented as a non-toxic gas delivery alternative capable of targeted, measured therapy in cancer, stroke, diabetes, and neurodegeneration. The future of medicine is nanobubble. Chapter 15. My dream, the dream of Indonesian researchers, Indonesia's first Nobel Prize. Could nanobubbles be the answer? My dream, the dream of Indonesian researchers, Indonesia's first Nobel Prize. Why has Indonesia never won a Nobel Prize? Since 1901, no Indonesian scientist has received a Nobel Prize. The author asks whether this reflects ability or a system that fails to support implementation. Thousands have studied abroad at great public expense, but achievements often end in Q1 journal publications rather than usable medical innovation. Expensive GMP/CPOB requirements and lack of capital prevent discoveries from reaching implementation. Could nanobubbles finally bring Indonesia a Nobel Prize in medicine? 3 pillars that could bring a Nobel. The book identifies 3 pillars. Cleaning blood vessels in heart disease, stroke, and degeneration, including capillary plaque beyond the reach of conventional methods and restoration of tissue regarded as irreversible. Mitochondrial therapy, bringing oxygen to deprived cells, supporting ATP production, and using hydrogen to reduce inflammation and free radical injury. Gasotransmitter regulation, using NO for vasodilation and apoptosis, microdose CO for inflammation and immunity, and H2S for pancreatic and metabolic homeostasis. If globally implemented, the author asks whether this would be more than a Nobel, perhaps the greatest medical revolution of the 21st century. The Nobel Prize between science and global politics. Nobel recognition is described as influenced not only by science but by geopolitics and academic networks. The book cites Otto Warburg's work on cancer and hypoxia, Hans Krebs's work on cellular energy metabolism, and Yoshinori Osumi's work on autophagy. Nanobubbles are presented as potentially integrating hypoxia, mitochondria, and homeostasis into a method for reversing degeneration. The author asks whether Indonesia's first Nobel could therefore become real. Nobel recognition as a paradigm change. Global recognition would cause the world to see Indonesia as an innovator rather than a medical market, encourage scientists to pursue implementation rather than publication alone, and position the country as a biotechnology leader. The chapter concludes that the system must support implementation, that nanobubbles satisfy the author's 3 proposed pillars, and that international recognition is possible if Indonesia fights for the technology rather than allowing another nation to claim it. The choice is ours. Chapter 16. Nanobubbles as a new diplomatic and economic instrument for Indonesia. Health as leverage in global diplomacy. Modern national power is measured not only by military and economic strength but by dominance in health and biotechnology. China demonstrated this during COVID-19 by becoming a major supplier of vaccines, medicines, and medical equipment. The United States uses pharmaceutical and biotechnology capacity as soft power, while smaller countries such as Israel use health innovation diplomatically. If nanobubbles can resolve diseases now regarded as incurable, the author argues that Indonesia would possess leverage unavailable to other nations. It could become the first country to offer the therapy widely, require other countries to build relationships to gain access, and transform from a medical market into a center of global health innovation. Medical tourism, Can Indonesia become a leading destination? More than 2 million Indonesians are said to travel abroad annually for treatment, taking more than 100 trillion Indonesian rupiah to Malaysia, Singapore, and other countries. Indonesia is therefore a customer of other nations' medical tourism industries. Nanobubbles are presented as a means of reversing this flow through services claimed to offer scientifically proven reverse aging. Stroke rehabilitation capable of recovering brain tissue previously considered irreversible. Cancer therapy based on cellular oxygenation and gasotransmitters. Regeneration in Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other degenerative conditions. If patients from around the world came to Indonesia, medical tourism could become a new economic pillar and major source of foreign exchange. How could Indonesia gain economically? Indonesia's health sector remains dominated by imported products and drug-based treatment. Nanobubbles are described as applicable not only to medicine but to beauty, sport, wellness, and longevity. The book proposes building international nanobubble health centers in Indonesia. Creating regulation that accelerates domestic and international recognition. Licensing the technology and using controlled technology transfer abroad. Making nanobubble medical tourism part of national economic policy. Properly managed, the author says, Indonesia could become known for the world's most revolutionary health technology. Indonesia as a major global biotechnology player. Nanobubbles could become a diplomatic instrument, a medical tourism magnet, and a source of national income. Indonesia need not remain a market, it can lead innovation and biotechnology. The author asks whether the country will seize this opportunity or allow another nation to develop and claim it. What is the value of 5 additional healthy years? When considering revolutionary medicine, the author asks how many lives could have been saved had the technology existed earlier. Steve Jobs, who died of pancreatic cancer in 2011, is used as an example. As one of the world's greatest innovators, what would 5 more healthy years have been worth to him? What would 5 more years be worth to Steve Jobs? Forbes estimated Jobs' wealth at about $10 billion before his death. The book asks whether he would have paid $1 billion, $5 billion, or more for 5 additional healthy years. For someone who had achieved extraordinary wealth, time rather than money would have become the most valuable asset. This, the author argues, is the true economic potential of reverse aging and therapy for diseases considered incurable. From Steve Jobs to millions of other people. Millions die annually from cancer, stroke, and degenerative disease. If technology could extend healthy life, its value would exceed money because it returns time with family and the opportunity to continue contributing. The text mentions Steve Jobs, Chadwick Boseman, and other notable people who might have lived longer had such technology existed. The potential is measured not only financially but in restored time. The author asks whether Indonesia will turn the technology into a global health revolution or allow another country to take it. The economic value of 5 additional years in Cristiano Ronaldo's career. Cristiano Ronaldo is presented not merely as a footballer but as a global economic asset. With a reported contract of approximately €200 million per year, 5 additional years at peak performance might be worth about €1 billion in salary and commercial contracts, apart from the wider value generated for clubs, sponsors, audiences, and sport. Is Ronaldo's career limited mainly by aging? The book argues that elite careers often end not because skill disappears but because organs, recovery, stamina, and tissue regeneration decline with age. If reverse aging maintained oxygen delivery, mitochondrial energy, muscle recovery, and vascular function, an athlete might remain competitive for longer. Global effects beyond Ronaldo. Extending elite careers could affect football clubs, media rights, sponsorship, ticket sales, national teams, training academies, and the wider sport industry. The same logic is applied to other athletes and performers whose knowledge, reputation, and productive capacity have taken decades to build. Reverse aging and Indonesia's human capital investment. Indonesia invests heavily in educating and developing exceptional scientists, leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and athletes. When such people decline early through disease or aging, society loses not only an individual but accumulated experience and national investment. The cost of producing world-class human resources. World-class expertise requires decades of education, practice, failure, relationships, and judgment. Replacing a senior expert is not simply a matter of educating another person, much tacit knowledge cannot be transferred quickly. Things that cannot be learned in school. Wisdom, intuition, networks, leadership, and the ability to respond to crisis are built through lived experience. Extending the healthy lives of highly capable people could preserve these assets for society. What if Indonesia could reverse aging in its best people? The author imagines senior scientists continuing research, experienced businesspeople continuing to build industry, national leaders retaining wisdom, and athletes extending productive careers. Reverse aging is therefore framed not only as personal medicine but as a strategy for national development. Will we allow time to defeat our best people? The chapter concludes that healthy time has enormous personal and economic value. Nanobubbles are presented as capable of extending productive life, preserving human capital, strengthening medical tourism, and giving Indonesia a new source of diplomatic and economic power. Chapter 17. Epilogue, A Health Revolution, a Revolution in Civilization. Nanobubbles, the beginning of a new era in human health. The author describes nanobubbles as the beginning of a new era in which treatment no longer merely suppresses symptoms but restores oxygen, microcirculation, mitochondrial function, and homeostasis. Diseases once called irreversible are presented as potentially reversible. Will we miss this opportunity? Every technological revolution creates a brief opportunity for pioneers. Indonesia can support, document, regulate, and develop its discovery, or delay until another country moves faster. The author warns against allowing bureaucracy, skepticism, or foreign interests to extinguish innovation. Indonesia, from market nation to innovation nation. The central national message is repeated: Indonesia must cease being merely a consumer of imported health technology and become a producer, owner, and global teacher. Nanobubbles are offered as the vehicle for that transformation. The future is ours to shape. The future will not be given automatically. Scientists, citizens, investors, and leaders must choose whether to build it. The epilogue ends with confidence that Indonesia can lead a global health revolution if it has the courage to act. Closing the temptation of $100 million, will we sell this technology to China? The closing section describes an alleged offer or temptation involving $100 million for the technology. The author asks whether Indonesia should accept immediate wealth or preserve long-term strategic ownership. Why does China want this technology? China is portrayed as recognizing nanobubbles not merely as a treatment but as a strategic biotechnology asset with applications in health, longevity, sport, and economic influence. Acquiring it could give China control over licensing, production, research, and global deployment. What would happen if we sold it? Indonesia might receive a large one-time payment but lose control, intellectual property leadership, future licensing income, medical tourism opportunity, diplomatic leverage, and a chance to build a domestic biotechnology industry. The technology might later return to Indonesia as an expensive imported product. What should we do? The book proposes retaining ownership in Indonesia, building a domestic industry, permitting only controlled technology transfer, using access as diplomatic leverage, establishing Indonesian treatment centers, and becoming the global leader rather than merely a technology supplier. Conclusion: sell or lead. Nanobubbles are described as a strategic national asset. China is said to understand their revolutionary value and to be prepared to pay $100 million. Selling would sacrifice the opportunity for global leadership. Retaining and developing the technology could make Indonesia a major health industry power. The final choice is stated plainly: sell and become a spectator, or retain the technology and become a leader.